Good afternoon, and welcome to the Commonwealth Club. My name is John Cunningham. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the National AIDS Memorial, and I want to express our deep gratitude for being here today. I specifically want to call out our partner and friend, Michelle Miao, for her collaboration and work over the last numbers of months, actually I think probably over the last several years, of the opportunity to bring some of the Pedro Zamora Young Eater Scholars to this room. Thank you, Michelle, and thank you to the Commonwealth Club. Welcome to all of you in the room here today and those of you who are viewing remotely. I think it's important as we open this to realize where we are as a country and the powerful work that needs to continue and the legacy that the AIDS crisis offers for all of us to use as a touchstone, not only of action, but also for a hope for a brighter future. The Pedro Zamora Scholarship Program was created a number of years ago, well over a decade, to bring young voices into the conversation. We are so honored and appreciative of our partnership with Gilead Sciences, who have supported this program over the last 15 years. And we are so proud to have scholarshiped hundreds of individuals with approaching over $750,000 in scholarships at this point. The National AIDS Memorial holds dearly its responsibility to ensure that all lives cut short are remembered and that the lessons and legacy of the AIDS crisis are remembered for future generations to look back on. It's critical that we realize that out of the darkness of the AIDS crisis, a community rose up and a community found hope in each other and found an opportunity to create action and change within our society. And I think we can all agree that change in our society and in our government is needed now more than ever. Today, we are honored not only to have some of our scholars with us, but we are also honored to have two individuals who, well, back in the day were young activists themselves, but time moves on and we become older activists. Mike Shriver will be moderating today's conversation. Mike has been involved in the AIDS advocacy and activism program for many, many years as an AIDS activist. He has developed programs, organizational development. He has focused on public policy efforts for well over 3 decades. His efforts have been at the local, statewide, national, and international levels and have encompassed issues including prevention, care, research, and community organizing. Mike has served numerous organizations at the board level as well as other leadership levels, including the National AIDS Memorial, AMFAR, NAPWA, HIV Prevention Project, Tenderloin AIDS Resource Center, Mobilization Against AIDS, the International Gay and Lesbian Human Rights Commission, and the San Francisco Ryan White Care Council, and the list could go on and on. In addition, Mike was a founding member of the original ACT UP San Francisco. Mike served the citizens of San Francisco as its health commissioner, and he was also a special advisor to Mayor Brown on AIDS policy. Currently, Mike is the president of the Vahad, which is the Jewish word for board of directors, of Congregation Shar Zahav, San Francisco's LGBT synagogue. We're so honored that Mike will be leading this, moderating this conversation. But before we bring Mike and the scholars to the stage, we are deeply honored to have a person with us today who not only served this organization, but also goes all the way back to the days of Pedro with a personal connection. Eric Chisulo, who served on our board. Eric, we are equally honored to have your participation today. A long-term survivor since his AIDS diagnosis in 1991, Eric has provided decades of service to the HIV and AIDS communities. In addition to his 10 years on the board of the National AIDS Memorial, Eric has served on boards of Stop AIDS Project, Lyric, and the San Francisco AIDS Foundation, and for 3 years as president of the National Association for People with AIDS, NAPWA. As a long-term advocate and service provider, Eric has organized alongside and mentored queer, homeless, and HIV-positive youth activists in the early 1990s. Eric and Pedro were deeply close, personal friends and colleagues. It is now my honor to introduce and bring to the stage Eric Chisulo.
Hi, everybody. I don't usually write down my notes, but I was told I had 5 minutes, so I timed it. More than 30 years later, it's hard to fully describe the impact that Pedro Zamora had on bringing HIV awareness to young people, or that he had more broadly on the world. He's mostly known as the breakout star of MTV's The Real World San Francisco, filmed in 1994. To see a smart, funny, talented educator, a Latinx refugee from Cuba, an openly and unapologetically gay kid of 21 years, who just happened to be movie star handsome and incredibly charismatic, was something brand new in the mainstream American media. He opened doors and hearts in a novel and compelling manner and provided a valuable point of reference for gay men of all ages struggling with the closet and their own sense of value. His on-screen marriage to Sean Sasser, another HIV-positive youth advocate who was cut from the same cloth as Pedro and an African American, was a first and started brand new discussions about same-sex marriage and what it meant to be young, gay, and free. Pedro was a uniquely gifted educator, brilliant, charming, and funny, thoughtful and empathetic, candid, relentless, and often demanding. His confidence and abilities were honed in the years before The Real World as he provided AIDS prevention education to hundreds of middle and high school-aged youth, awareness and training to hundreds more youth-serving professionals and peer counselors at regional and national conferences, and gave testimony to Congress on the importance of culturally and linguistic appropriate AIDS prevention education, including the use of graphic vernacular commonly used by young people. Pedro was open and unapologetic, not just about being a sexually active gay teenager, but unashamed of his infection at a time of incredible stigma and fear. This was an incredibly big deal. In 1994, HIV infection was the leading cause of death among Americans aged 25 to 44, you might remember, and it was cumulatively so from at least 1987 to 1997. There was incredible anxiety and ignorance about HIV in the so-called general public, but meaningful education about it was lacking at every level, especially among young people. And while AIDS was still largely seen as a gay disease, what little sex ed that was offered to students largely steered clear of anything specific about queer sexual behaviors that could lead to or prevent infection. Pedro saw in these exclusions profound danger and discrimination. He was only 19 when I met him. 21 when he landed on the set of The Real World, but he responded to the HIV epidemic as the most urgent, pressing issue of his time, resolving to devote the rest of his life to trying to help arm other young people with the tools to stay healthy and HIV-free. Heartbreakingly, he died in 1994 at 22 years old, the day after the final episode of The Real World aired. But Pedro's leadership, commitment, and sense of urgency led us to create this scholarship named after him. He's an aspirational example of youth leadership and proof that one person can have a profound influence on the world. I think most of us here would agree that we're living in a time of growing anxiety in the face of the political chaos that we're staring down. But it's exactly in these times, times of disruption and repression, when it's felt like everything is on the line, that we've seen dramatic movements for social change led by young people. Young people have always been the driving force behind meaningful social change. The Pedro Zamora Young Leadership Scholarship exists to spotlight and support the efforts of undergraduate changemakers. The emphasis of the scholarship is first to promote their work, the work of young people who are leading efforts to mitigate and end the HIV epidemic for all of us, for good. As educators, as activists, and as medical professionals, we're all still living with AIDS, and we're still living with all of the other epidemics that fuel HIV infections and illness: racism, queer and transphobia, the misogyny that's rolled back our bodily autonomy and reproductive freedoms, poverty, homelessness, out-of-control gun violence, and untreated addiction and mental illness, domestic violence, and more. We know that many young people working for health and social justice are having an impact on the AIDS epidemic, even as they respond with Pedro's sense of urgency to these other most pressing issues of our time. We're proud to support and spotlight their work as well, and I hope you look forward to hearing from them as much as I do today. Thanks for your time and attention.
Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Hello.
I'm Mike Shriver, and By way of a small introduction to my relationship to the Pedro Scholarship Program, John said it began over about a decade ago. And actually, 15 years ago, we created a scholarship program at the Grove, as we call it, because we thought that it was important that the National AIDS Memorial invest in the next generation. I don't think we had any idea what that meant when we started. But over the course of years, we saw this thing, what was an essay. We had people write an essay and like what the AIDS Grove means to me as a young activist, I think was the first question we asked, to what has now become this program where we have scholarship recipients who are doing some amazing intersectional work. The only limit from the National AIDS Memorial's perspective on the scope of the Pedro Scholarship was our own imagination. When we decided that intersectional politics and intersectional work was, in fact, HIV prevention, HIV care, HIV research, that ending all those constellation of isms and phobias that compound HIV, that was our job as an organization, was to fund not future leaders, but current leaders. And part of it was the language change that we had at the memorial, that we weren't funding new leaders or emerging leaders, but we were funding individuals in college who are actually doing the work and actually leading the charge. And so I've been with this program from the very beginning. Nothing brings me as much pride as seeing the four of you up here, because I've read and watched each of your application and your processes, and it is an honor to be here. So for everyone who's watching and everyone here in the audience, how about if we do this first? How about if the four of you introduce yourselves to everybody, and don't give away the whole story, but just a little bit about who you are, where you're from, just the quick getting to know you mingler kind of questions. So why don't we start here, and we'll just go down the line.
Sure thing. My name is Peter. I'm born and raised a Bay Area, and I think most of my work is in the environmental space, but also in the other intersectional space that you've discussed earlier. So, yeah.
Hey everybody, my name is Dante. I was born in a little cow town in northern Nevada. I went to school in Oregon, and I currently live in San Luis Obispo, and my work involves public health, mutual aid, and climate advocacy.
Hello, my name is Bo Wong. I am a first-generation Korean-American immigrant and the first in my family to go to college. I grew up in Los Angeles, and I moved here for my work, and then I just ended up staying in the Bay Area. Yeah, happy to be here.
All right, hello everybody. My name is Jesus Aguilar. I'm from Santa Rosa, California, so not far from here. I go to the University of San Francisco. I'm a first-year critical diversity studies major, public policy minor. So a lot of what I do has been throughout the years has been a lot focused around the Chicano movement, moving on to progressing into Latina movements, immigrant rights, all of that, coming into college. Just how can we protect our undocumented students on campus, off campus, all of that.
Great. So one of the things that I'm hoping that we're going to do is there's going to be some perfunctory questions to sort of get the conversation going, but I'd like it if the five of us, actually if the four of you would have much more of the conversation, because I think the question that really needs to be answered before we're done this afternoon is, what advice are you going to give to that next generation of the soon to become the new leaders? So we'll get to that. So in terms of your Pedro Scholarship, what year were you a Pedro Scholar currently? Or
I think I was 2020.
2020. And Dante, what years were you?
I want to say 2016, 17, and 18, somewhere in that range, but I was a 3-time recipient.
And Bo?
I was a 2-time recipient. I believe it was 2019 and 2020.
And Jesus?
I was just last year, so about 2023, I believe it is.
So a nice cross-section of some of our recipients. So, Bo, what started your activism journey? Like, who inspired you?
Yeah, I was thinking of this question on my way here. I think it was really my lived experiences, but mainly it was my grandmother. She survived the Korean War. She's this very small 4'11" Korean lady, but she was really fierce, and I think she kind of inspired me in ways. And I'm a 90s baby, grew up in Hollywood, and it was a very height of a lot of different things coming in the sense of my own Korean American identity and also in the sense of my own queerness and transness. And I think seeing that and having trans elders and seeing them pass away from something called, at the time, we were like, what is this? There was still a lot of stigma even when I was growing up around HIV. And I think that that really inspired me. Some of the other trans elders, some of my peers who passed away from HIV, just really inspired me to want to do something about it, like that sense of urgency that Pedro have. So that's what inspired me. Yeah.
And Dante?
Yeah, I really resonate, Bo, with just that sense of identity from a young age. I knew that I was queer. I'm non-binary. I use they and he pronouns. And navigating the world before you even really know how it works as like a young queer person, it becomes really apparent that society is not built for all of us. It's very intentionally exclusionary and makes it difficult to just be accepted and celebrated alongside your peers who fit in better. And so that from a young age just really showed me there's something not right. There's something unequal here. And even without education, I knew that was wrong. And then I would say my education was really probably the most impactful thing for my activism, getting to understand why the world is the way that it is, and that there are things we can do about it, that there are, institutions with people representing those systems that you can engage with, and that by studying, history, politics, art, science, you can learn what there is to do about it and why and how.
Peter, how about you?
I don't know if there was always that one moment that sparked inspiration to get involved in activism, because my family, kind of like Bo's, are war refugees, survived poverty, regime change, all of that. And so when they came to the U.S., the last thing they wanted to was to get involved in politics. They said, don't get into trouble, don't get into jail, don't get involved with the criminal system. Keep your head down, study hard, and move forward and bring your family forward. And so I think it was during high school for me where I started to do more volunteer work in the community. And it was a gentle lady who worked with me and kind of said, kind of offhanded, like, have you ever thought of serving? Like, serve in some capacity or lead in some change? And that was kind of like a little spark. But as I did the work over and over, you got to start to see kind of where the problems kind of have gaps, where solutions that our institutions were prescribing or the programs that we're trying to fund were not meeting the needs of the people in the ground. And that can be all sorts of things in healthcare. In the AIDS movement, it meant, we're pouring all this money into research, but people are still dying, or people are not being taken care of. In many neighborhoods, including mine, and I'm sure here in San Francisco, there's, anti-poverty programs, but people are still homeless, and people are still unhoused and struggling. So that's where I started to kind of see, like, okay, maybe I should get a little bit more involved while still trying to steer that path of how do I move forward and move my career forward. And then the moment came in 2018 where the campfires got involved. Then those happened, and that was kind of the spark where I said, okay, I'd like to do more for our environment to promote clean air, clean water for us, because this doesn't look like a problem that can wait. And it just reminds me of a quote that one of my mentors said. She says, I've worked with a lot of students, and a lot of people say, I want to help my community. But the reality is, if you don't start now, you never will. It's like a habit and a muscle that needs to be built up over time. So that's what sparked my willingness to fight and to be involved.
Jesus?
Yeah, so I kind of would say I have two. Just like coming to my identity, it kind of stems from my mom. always telling me to hold on to my heritage, always hold on to my identity. She always like mentioned, going into college and all that, you'll lose track of, what really matters to you. You might just assume that it just might be just college, get your degree and all that, but uphold your identity, be proud of yourself for that. And, she really did have a point on that, going into higher education historically was never really built for, minority people, minority communities. So just upholding that really stemmed from my mom. And then like the second one, I would definitely say like moving into like community work and serving in activism, I would say it was my AP Spanish teacher, which kind of pushed me into, MECHA, which is a Movimiento Estudiantil Chicanx de Aztlán, which is basically the Chicano movement. And kind of stemming through that, like join the social justice program. And I was like in my freshman year and I was like, oh God, I don't know, I'm too shy. But then she kind of pushed me in there. And since then I just knew that she was going to be a great mentor for me for the next 4 years of high school. And she was basically the main reason why I live unapologetically. I definitely express what I feel about current policies from now and in the past, and how can we uplift our communities instead, and what are the better alternatives that we could do for our communities all around the world, and not only in the nation but all over the world.
Yeah.
So let's stick with that for a minute. So what are you currently focused on now with your activism?
Yeah, so a lot of what I do on my campus right now is primarily serve students. So a lot of what I do on my campus is I'm part of our school senate, which is basically like the student government on campus that run legislation, resolutions, and all that. And just last semester, I was a student of color representative, and I released urgency and an urgent resolution for our university, because a lot of our university is like, oh, we're a social justice school, but, what do we do about it? They just kind of expect our students to do all the work about it. Basically, we have demonstrations happening on our campus, and they practically shun them away and, don't really work with them when it's a social justice school. That's what they're meant to be. So, being a student color representative, I've been focusing a lot about, how can we protect our undocumented students on campus. A lot of our undocumented students are actually the ones holding these demonstrations, a lot of protests on our campus, and having our university, call the police when they know that that is a really big risk right now is super dangerous and super wrong of them to do. So, we're passing resolutions of, demanding our university to not only protect our undocumented students, but also support the students that are also leading the initiative to create a sanctuary school, because they failed to do that in the past. So, that's a lot of what I do on my campus, a lot of protecting our undocumented students on and off campus, provide them legal resources around the Bay Area that are low to no cost as well.
And Bo? I'm just going to come down.
Wow, I'm so inspired. Yeah, thank you for sharing, everyone. For me, I think over time, my activism kind of like changed. Initially, it was kind of on the grounds doing peer health education, a lot of like peer counseling and things like that around sexual health. Now it looks really different in the sense that I'm combining what I love. I love doing martial arts. So I was actually part of like a queer trans martial arts team back in Los Angeles when I was a homeless youth. And that really, like being around, just having role models and stuff really inspired me. So the activism that I looks kind of different, but actually, so I actually have a yellow belt in judo and taekwondo, and I'm trying to advance more. Right now, essentially, it's teaching self-defense classes to trans people, and what does that look like? And to me, it feels it's very like, I think we're talking about intersectionality, and I'm thinking of ways like gender euphoria, thinking about ways just people could be authentically themselves, and what does that mean in this world today? So that's a little bit of what my activism looked like. It looks different. Before, it used to be a lot of like workshops and speaking engagements, but now I'm trying to also protect my energy as well. So that's just a little bit of what I do. Yeah.
Dante?
Well, I love that you're protecting your energy. I think that that's really, really important when you give, like, activism takes everything. It takes all of you. And so I'm actually, after today, I'm taking a couple days vacation here in the city as my rest. But usually what I'm vacationing from is during the day, I work in environmental health. Particularly, I'm working to take natural gas and carbon sources out of our built environment, which accounts for 30% of global greenhouse gas emissions. And in addition to that, believe it or not, huffing natural gas that you burn in your home is not good for you. And it's a lot easier in a state like California for those with more income to make the switch to newer technologies that are more comfortable and improve air quality. So I'm particularly working in manufactured housing communities, which is where the majority of our low to moderate income homeowners live. A lot of seniors, a lot of single women. And it's like a very clear intersection with the other work that I've done in my life around public health. It's all about like connecting communities who are excluded with resources to live and to live well. I really love hearing that, you know, we all come from different backgrounds, but our identities and the backgrounds that we come from, what we share in common is that we come from excluded and marginalized backgrounds. And so despite those differences, it brought us all here today to this stage. And I did just want to mention that outside of my day job, the work never ends. And my community in particular right now is being targeted by ICE raids and deportations. And so serving our immigrant communities, preparing our queer community for similar repression, building out mutual aid networks is really the heart of the work because you know, the resources aren't readily available in the systems that exist as they do. So reappropriating those resources with like-minded people and just making sure folks are fed and cared for. That's like, it's crazy to think, but that's radical work in this day and age, and it's very rewarding.
So the question, so my activism, what does that look like today? And before?
Yes.
So I started out in the youth environmental movement. That was like the big one that really I gave a lot of my time to. So that meant focused on environmental legislation and passing those at the municipal and state levels because sometimes Congress can't move fast enough. But over time, that work has transitioned itself over to youth services, education, housing for people and poverty. So and to some extent medical care. So that's kind of the different touch points that I get to work with in my life.
It struck me, and Dante, when you were doing sort of that really nice sort of what we all are together, that all four of you have talked about safety as a grounding principle of the work that you're doing, whether it's saving people, saving agencies, saving just protection. And I think that if there's a word that I don't know if Eric would use this often about Pedro, but the idea about visibility and safety, my job is to make the world a safer place for my community. It just struck me that all of you in different language, but all talked about safety and protection as sort of foundational, and I think that's pretty remarkable. So here's the other question that activists don't normally talk about with each other, but how was your activism received on campus when you started doing it? I'll just share with you a brief story that with ACT UP, we did a lot of direct action events that were not always so happily received. They were a bit controversial. Some people thought we were the wrong target, the wrong place, the wrong whatever. But when you were doing your work on campus, how was it received? Like, how did your friends deal with you? Was it good for your life? Was it bad for your dating life? Was it good for your social life? Like, Peter?
Well, actually, I didn't even start on campus. I went kind of to the next level beyond campus, and that was local government and state government. Initially, it wasn't received too well, but I think over time, as there was some really deep listening and an understanding of where the incentives were aligning or not aligning, that helped so that there is more motivation to work together now to kind of move things forward. So I'd say it started out as not so great, but then it became better over time, and that's what we always want. In terms of life, I don't think I had a life outside of this work. I think sometimes the work consumes itself, and And I know we might say, well, I'll put a stop for myself, but when it becomes really fun, you just don't stop. But that's just me. I don't know. Grace?
Yeah, I had to learn as well how to find that balance between the work and the joy. Because at the end of the day, we're not just delivering resources and service to these communities to meet like a basic need. We're doing it so that we can love each other and love life together. And so once I realized that the best form of activism is just throwing a party where people can also access resources, that really helped me to feel like I was giving back to myself as well. I was able to not just be so like serious and dire all the time, but we could get like, worked up about it together and still feel like there are things worth fighting for, framed in a way of like joy and like collaboration. So
I'll come back to you, Bob, but you were a scholarship recipient 3 years in a row. So from your first year to your second year to your third year, the work that you were doing on campus, did you see it sort of grow, or did it change, or was it just one clear path from the beginning to the end?
Oh yeah, it was really easy and simple. No, it was, my work did build on itself, and that was, I think especially at university, you only have 4 years. And so you need to make it count because the institution is counting on you to leave.
Yeah.
And so that was a lot of the pushback that I received, is people that were trying to put obstacles in my way and slow me down and hope that like, oh, well, you'll be gone soon. And then, I won't have to install these like condo dispensers. But because I built my reputation and because I kept just growing, like, you can't get super distracted. Like, there's so many little fires that you could put out. But if you really do a couple of things well and tend to them, I mean, the National AIDS Memorial Grove, of course, is understanding of how nurturing those seeds and those like saplings into the tree, like that's legacy. And that's the beauty of the work.
Yeah. Bo?
Yes, well, you said that so beautifully. I'm like, what? I'm like, do I know these people? I'm like, I need to get your autograph. I think I'm so blessed in a sense. I think like that our next panelists, Lance, Cecilia Chung, John, and Pedro, I think kind of like led the way, and I believe I'm just standing on the shoulders of y'all's work, because I went to undergrad at a time where DEI and all these things were coming up, and I actually didn't have any pushback at all. Got funding, started a student organization, training undergrad students to become HIV test counselors, and going to queer themed parties, fraternities, doing HIV testing. It's still existing today, which I'm like, wow, that's amazing. As an organization started back like in 2015, 16. And so many people, so I think in that sense, I was really blessed. There weren't really that much of a pushback for me. But yeah, I just want to thank the previous generation for leading the way.
Yeah, I would say the same too. Thinking, of course, the past generation has made it so much easier now, but just because of that as well, having it's different having the support from our students from on campus and like in comparison to like actual administration on campus. Being a social justice school, a Jesuit valued school, a lot of our students are super student led campuses. It's a super student led campus. Sorry about that. And so that means a lot of our administration might lack having that good connection with our students, but a lot of our campus is really worked. It's really happening. All the work happening on our campus is because of our students. So I feel like I have had great mentors. transitioning to my first year of college, having those people that, I could stand by, and just learning the whole power of solidarity too, as well. When I came into my first year of college, I thought that, I just need to stand for my values and, try to focus on, working on for the Latina people. But, going into college, you see that a ton of different missions and different movements all intersect, and and in this time of age is really important to have solidarity, just because a lot of different minority groups, a lot of different movements are being shut down in this administration. So it is really important to, grow that solidarity and also have that value of education as well included as well, knowing other people's history, how is their history also, how does it involve us and all that. It all intersects. So I definitely believe my campus has been really great in supporting all the students supporting each other, but as well our administration finally listening to us and what we need from them.
Yeah.
So when you sat down to write your application, the application for the scholarship, it was clear to like, what are you doing on campus? So what did you do when you had your first idea about doing something on campus? Who did you go to? Like, where did you, we talk about like the sage of all the elders before us, but none of us were on campus or near you when you decided to do your so what was what was that spark that got you from that idea that you want to do this to actually putting one foot in front of the other and doing it?
All right.
Yeah, you're right next to me, so you're going to
I
get the question first. I know, you picked the wrong seat.
I know. It's interesting because I think the time I got involved in the youth climate movement, there was already global energy around that. There was a lot of people who were already doing sit-ins and hunger strikes, or at least protesting and trying to ask for change. And so I kind of sat there and I thought, okay, well, this is a one-time blimp of energy. How can this now be sustained and be translated into enduring policies that will survive different administrations, different Congresses, different generations, and keep going? And so I kind of sat down and I kind of thought, what does the current landscape look like? What are the needs that could be filled? What are the different mechanisms and tools that are available to use that? Whether that be, most of the time, what does the tax code allows for? What are the different funding structures? And then, and that's when I came up with, together with other people, an idea of maybe we can form an organization that can try to translate this energy into actual policies that could be passed and then implemented. And so when that happened, the conversation is always talk to the stakeholders, and that includes the community members who are involved, because it takes a movement. It takes more than one person to move something forward together. So the conversation started out with my community members. Did this fit in what they envisioned for? And can I get their support and buy-in? Can I bring their energy to move this thing forward? And then once that was there, it was talking to the other stakeholders, those who would fund the project, those who could potentially oppose the project, to kind of feel out what are the potential fights that might come up and how can we diffuse them before they even happen, and then move fast, because the faster we move, the more we can get things done. So that's kind of how I started out.
Jesus, how about you?
I would say that a lot of my work now on campus, because I'm a first generation student, going into college, I was the only one from my high school to actually go to my college. So kind of finding my people there on campus was pretty difficult for the first half of my semester. But moving on to, finding my mentor, I would say my favorite mentor that has really pushed me onto all the campus involvement I do is, her name is Metzi Lemus, and she's from Sacramento. So she's such an amazing activist on campus. She's a third year right now, and she's like all over our campus. She's the Latina Undergrad Network of Activists president and all that, and she took me in under her wing and is mentoring me to how can I take in all that she has learned throughout the years here at this university, just because also as well the Latino population as well on our campus, the Latinx demographic on campus is also really small as well, but also counted as the second biggest demographic on our campus, although our school is really small. So yeah, it's just really weird, but yeah, so I would say that definitely she has taught me a lot. And, kind of learning from her that the best way you could take it in is that nonprofit organizations are like family. I feel like I've learned that a lot from her, that, you can always count on different nonprofits to always be there to support you, learn from them because they have been doing their movements for generations. So she has been a wonderful mentor for me, and, taking in what she has taught me has been such a blessing for me.
Dante?
So my work actually started when I was in high school. When I was queer, I was visible, and so other queer youth, found me and came to me, and we got to build community around that. Yeah. And in so doing, we got to share our experience and learned that we were not being given inclusive sex education. The AIDS crisis was being taught in a way that was perpetuating homophobia and was not actually teaching queer youth how to engage in safe sex. And so I immediately went to my health teacher, who understood and was supportive of me, but the only recourse was to go through the local government. And so, I was captain of my debate team. I knew how to, write a strongly worded letter and start to advocate, but that channel was slow. Bureaucracy is not kind to the sense of urgency we have in our work. And so then I turned to me because I had already kind of been there as someone who was pioneering being out and queer and making demands. And so I said, what can I do? I have privilege, I have standing, I have resources. And so I formed the first LGBT club at my high school, because even just having a space where we could come together and not feel like outsiders and understand what our needs were, that's where the kind of rest of the work came from, of like, okay, here's what we need to do. We started educating ourselves, and eventually the rest of the system caught up, and later in my high school career, they did start to introduce inclusive sex education, which was a real win. And very similar in my university experience, like I was on the student body government. And so that kind of allowed me to, I could identify the priorities. I could talk to my constituents. I could put postcards out and say all right, write to the administration and tell them how you feel. Ask for these things because I know that we need them. So just being kind of an instigator and a catalyst for that momentum to form into a movement.
Bo?
Yes, for me, so before university, I started out in community college, and we had I was part of this honors program. We had a research thesis to do, and as I was coming in terms of my queerness and my gender identity, I was a lot of the sex education around HIV is typically very cisgender focused, and I noticed that there was, because there's a lot of queer and bi and gay trans men, and I just felt like there wasn't enough education or awareness around that. So I kind of talked to one of my professors. I was like, I want to do this kind of community-led project, and it kind of led me to that, and that's how I kind of started my activism that way, doing research, going to the HIV Commission meetings, really advocating, pushing, bringing awareness, because you have to understand, this was mid-2000s, we were barely talking about trans people, and then talking about gay, bi, or queer trans men was what in the world? So it was definitely bringing, the focus then was a lot of awareness. So I focused on that, and then once I transferred to university, that's when there were a lot of funding, a lot of awareness, so it moved differently. Then I was okay, then let's, when I started the HIV organizations with the med student, the grad students, we were giving out HIV testing, things like that, back to where I grew up in Hollywood, to a lot of the trans women doing survival sex work and trans men as well. So I think it kind of shifted and changed. But yeah, that's how it started, coming into my own identity.
So I'm going to make a huge jump. So it's easy to talk about the work that you do. Easier.
Yeah.
But given how taxing this is, how much this affects your health, your physical health, your emotional health, your spiritual health, what do you do to take care of yourself? We've had a couple of people hint at this, but seriously, I think self-care is a form of activism. Yeah. So what do you do to take care of yourself?
Try to sleep sometimes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, I'll probably say that I enjoy being out in the field. A lot of protests. I enjoy, like, I was at May Day here in San Francisco. I was also part of like the anti-ICE protest that we had a few months ago as well. But you know, I can't always do that just because it's like miles of walking. So a lot of like self-care that I like to do is just educating people. Not like, oh, I will like sit you down and tell you, but kind of, you know, share what is happening in the news. That's kind of my type of self-care, just because I enjoy oversharing a lot. So that's kind of my way of, you know, sharing what's happening, keeping people updated. But also personally, like, I really enjoy just reading a lot of what's happening online, talking to people a lot. I really enjoy going out and talking to people, meeting new people a lot. That's for sure my type of self-care. And of course, getting my 8 hours of sleep when I can, because being a college student is, Jesus, a lot of work.
Yeah, for me, I think similar to Peter, I think sleep, spending time with my dog, being in nature, I think those are just some of the things I do for self-care.
Yeah, it's hard to make time when, like, it is energizing to do this work, and it's hard to feel like you can step away from it or even want to. So I try to just like live a healthy and balanced lifestyle so that I can sustain myself as I do the work. Yeah. I'm very grateful. I sleep like a baby somehow. And I'm always getting my 8 hours. Eating well makes all of the difference. And making sure you get exercise, even if it's just, you know, going for walks regularly. Like, our bodies are what take us through this. And like, we've learned from those who come before us that you cannot undervalue your health. So yeah, just making sure to take good care as much as you can. And when that gets hard, asking for help.
Yes.
So I've got a couple of questions that have come from the audience. I'm going to come back to the question of your advice to the next generation, but that's going to be how we wrap up. But one of the questions is there a fear that trans youth will suffer greatly by the reduced services that we're experiencing now? What do we do to fill the gap?
There's definitely a fear. There's a historical precedent for what happens when our resources get severed from our communities. But what I turn to and what I'm trying to build out now in my own community is a mutual aid network. This is the community, not an organization, not a nonprofit. They can help, they can be part of it, but just people coming together. Ask your neighbor what they need. Ask them what they're afraid of. Ask them what plan you can make with them so that they feel secure. And try to find other people in that network who can help to secure and bring those resources. Mutual aid was integral to the HIV and AIDS movement. We take care of us.
Yeah, this question is a tough one. I think so. I think a lot of funding are being cut for programs. But one thing that I have to say the difference, I'm not that old, I'm still young, but I think one of the main differences is access to social media. I think the younger generation know a lot more than when even I was like beginning my transition too. So I think that the youth are very powerful. Like seeing Jesus is like this year's scholar. I think that it's tough, but I have no doubt. I think that they're a lot more resilient and that they're going to get through this. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say for me, I always go back to just solidarity. I feel like in general, like as we mentioned here, you know, just standing with each other. How can we support each other in our communities? But as well, how can we realize that what can we do to support them as well, not just like stand with them, but also like definitely talk to your representatives. They're there to, you know, provide for you. They're your voice. They're supposed to amplify it to, you know, the houses of representatives, all of that. So, you know, just contacting your House of Representatives, your district representative, all of them, because they are definitely there to, you know, support you and what you want and what your community needs.
Yeah.
Well, I think the question, well, if I'm reflecting on the question, and the one word that struck out to me was the word fear. And I thought, well, was it president?
Let's stick with that word first. So if you had, like, given where we are right now in the political and social context of where we are right now in 2020, what are you afraid, what sort of invokes, what when you think of the word fear?
Yeah. Well, I was saying, you know, the question was about how should they respond, and I thought to myself, well, take some time to let it sit. But fear can be a very powerful motivator, and the thing with young people, you know, barring any catastrophe or health consequences, we've got another 60 to 80 years on Earth. That's a lot of time to make a lot of change and to wait some of this out, to kind of wait these things out, to really look at the long game and say, well, what is it what is the source of my fear, and what can I do to change that, and then kind of let that sit in and carry your heart and your soul and your movement forward. So that's kind of the thought that I had with fear, which is, you know, if you're young, you got at least 60 years, unless something happens, but to do things.
I am afraid of a lot. And I think it's important to admit that. But I'm afraid because there's so much to lose. Because there's so much worth, you know, saving and protecting from the things that I'm afraid of.
Yeah.
This planet, you know, our beautiful natural resources, queer identity, diverse culture. Those are all things that I love. And so my fear, you know, when you talk about examining where it comes from, my fear comes from a place of love. And that inspires me to be brave and to fight.
Wow, that was very beautifully said. Drop the mic, Peter and Dante. Oh, yeah. Yeah, but I think I think being strategic, navigating this fear, thinking that it's gonna pass, and thinking about value and seeing the big picture kind of calms my fear a lot, because there's a lot of work to be done, but a lot of work has been done as well. Yeah.
I would say, going into college, I kind of was like, okay, we're gonna get like a Democratic president, it's probably gonna be good, right? I'm gonna go into my DEI industry after college. Not really, so we'll see how that goes. But, you know, I kind of had a lot of hope at the start of my semester here at USF, but then moving on to my second semester, seeing the administration, what got chosen and all of that, I really got the first initial fear was, you know, how are my people, my Latina community going to be represented throughout the next 4 years? Yeah. The biggest fear is kind of how is this going to re-stigmatize what people may think of, you know, this community, the people that actually contribute billions of dollars into the economy. How are they going to be again targeted? So I kind of turned my fear throughout the first semester. I was scared my second semester when coming back in January. But you know, turning my fear into, you know, how can I use my privileges as a student, as a first generation, as a citizen? How can I use all of those to and be the voice for the communities that are afraid to? You know, people that are immigrants that can't really go out and be protesting against all these movements, all these legislation, executive orders that are happening. How can I use my privileges as a educated student, all of that? How can I use that to, you know, be the voice for other people as well?
I keep thinking that one of the things that we learned as AIDS activists, the older that we got and the more that we were, that the idea about intersectionality was critical to ending the AIDS epidemic. And what I'm most afraid of is over the last 140 some odd days, seeing that we've not only just taken all those steps, which include money, policy, visibility, and agency, like that people actually exist and have a right to exist, and have just thrown us back 40 years. And it's really hard to watch what I saw was progress just being so threatened. And so it gives me some hope that people are saying, focus, breathe, think, play the long game. So if you had to ask anybody on the panel a question, do you have a question you want to ask someone on the panel?
Goodness. How do you never lose hope?
Bo, how do you not lose hope?
For me, I mean, there's days that I do and days that I don't. I think my faith is something very important to me. My community is something very important to me. So I think that keeps me going and moving. And it's like, yeah, it's making the light at the end of the tunnel, even though you can't see it, kind of thing. Yeah.
You can ask one of your fellow panelists a question.
I would probably say maybe in 5 to 10 years, what is like the biggest stamp you want to have on the world? What's like one word that you want people to remember of you in the next 5 to 10 years?
Those are both really great questions.
Thank you.
Dante? Oh, Dante.
I want to be remembered for community, for bringing people together, for making us stronger.
Peter?
I mean, I've thought of that. I mean, I don't think I need to be remembered. I just need whatever work we worked on to keep going. And I think that's a part of it. I know we oftentimes in activism and advocacy, we celebrate the one figure who was the face of that. But really, there's a whole team behind that. There was a whole village. So any it could be a policy, it could be a technology, a company, an organization, whatever it is. But there's a lot of staff, a lot of volunteers, a lot of community members, a lot of energy who gave life to that. And history has a hard time remembering those, but that's okay because that stuff lives on. So I don't know if I need to be remembered per se, but just keep moving forward.
And Jesus, what gives you hope? I'm going to go back to, I'm going to jump the questions.
Oh God. Probably for me I would say how I really enjoy seeing how other communities are supporting each other right now in this light of day. I feel like moving into college and just kind of seeing how, all our communities work with each other has been really beautiful. I kind of would assume, just certain communities like do their own thing. But, coming into this college that, I intersect a lot of the movements together. I see how, a lot of communities support each other really well. And that really gives me a lot of hope, seeing how different minority groups, different communities, different nonprofits really support each other throughout this time.
Dante, what question would you like to ask your panelists?
What are you working on right now that energizes you?
Jesus?
Sure. There's so much that I've been working on for next year, but primarily for my junior year, I've been working on getting an internship in DC. So I got accepted as a McCarthy Fellow for my university. So I'll be I'll be confirmed to be transferring to Georgetown University for my first semester, my junior year. And being there, I plan to intern, and I hope to do work in the UN. So that's kind of my motivation as of right now, hoping to work for the UN Refugee Agency for sure. So that's kind of my motivation right now.
Bo, do you want to ask a question of one of your fellow panelists?
Yeah, I guess, where do you see yourself like 5 to 10 years from now?
Peter?
I mean, I can give an answer, but it'll probably change because I think my life has changed so much over the past 5 years. So I think in 5 years at least, I'd hope that I'd move forward in some of my work and some of the other existing work that I get to do, kind of pass it on a little bit, let go. And I think that's a little bit hard sometimes to let go. To see something that you've built or acquired over time, it's hard to kind of let go. But I think the lesson I've learned this past year is it's probably good to let go, especially if the prize is the larger movement. Otherwise, we get some backward steps.
Great. I think I'd like to hear the answer to that question from all of you, including you, Bo.
Bo and I were actually talking in the green room about taking things one day at a time.
Yeah.
It's really hard for me to, right now with everything going on, think 10 years in the future.
Yeah.
And so ideally, I will be happy and in community and doing the things that I love and having triumphed over some of the evils in this world. But for now, I think I'm just focusing on putting one foot in front of the other.
Jesus?
Oh, God. I kind of feel like moving into college, I kind of lost track of what I really valued before coming here. So before coming to college, in high school and like in elementary school and middle school, I did a lot of music education. So I played in a mariachi and in the symphony. So I was a violinist for years, like I think about 10 years now, 11, 12 years. So I feel like coming into college, I kind of lost that track, but I really want to go back in 10 years and begin creating a nonprofit that promotes music education and bringing in music programs into middle to low income, districts that can't provide that opportunity of music education in their, high schools or middle schools as well. Just because in my middle school and high school, I didn't have any opportunity to, play an instrument. So I had to go out of my way to find one that's closer, like a town over, to play with a mariachi and all that. So, just bringing in that opportunity to students, just because music education is super important for sure. And, that it really not only just gives you that music education, musical knowledge, but also it really helps you, create ties to your cultural heritage and all that as well.
So, Bo, you get to answer your own question.
I hope I would be a more wiser, more patient, more softer human being. I think, sometimes I lose my patience with everything going on. I think we survived so many things over these past years. But I hope to become just a better human being. But also I would love to kind of intersect my passion for HIV work and social justice and gender affirming care. And I'll really just kind of go on with my schooling, go to med school and just really do that and provide a kind of gender affirming care, and with HIV work, come back to the city and do things like that. So,
And I want to add to that too. I know I said in the earlier that 5 to 10 years, I hope to move forward in training and everything else and let go. I think the one thing I just remembered, because Bo brought it up, which is I'd also like to take a step back and go back to what we've built and just kind of reflect. So I think time can pass by pretty fast, and whatever the why was that got us started on this path can move or get murky up. So it's always good to come and take a step back and remember, well, this is the path I took, and this is why I did it.
Yeah.
And this is why I will keep going.
That's a great point. So we're slowly coming to the end of our time together, which I'm not happy about. I would love to be here for a lot longer. So if I were to commission the four of you to be ambassadors for the Pedro Zamora Scholarship Fund, what's your pitch to the next generation? What the audacity that I have of hope that the four of you give me? I mean, it's pretty audacious that you give me this much hope, but what do you say to the next generation to get them ready to apply for a Pedro Scholarship, to be ready to pick out their new environmental cause or their new social justice cause? So, Peter, I'm not going to call on you first because I keep calling you first all the time.
I'm like your
I know
buddy here.
You're right here.
I know.
So, Dante, since you actually have been the scholar the longest, the scholarship, so what's your pitch to the next generation of new leaders?
Yeah, before I got the Pedro Zamora Young Leader Scholarship, I knew that my work was inspired by HIV and AIDS activism. But once I received the scholarship, it made me realize I was part of this very important movement. And that feeling like I wasn't alone is what I would really echo to any youth that is thinking about applying for this, who's giving everything they have. Just know, like, it's hard. Like, I grew up in a small town. I didn't know anything about what anybody else was doing. But once I realized that I was building on the legacy of other people who gave everything, literally everything, to make the world a better place, and that I have benefited from that and experienced like so much love and joy in my life that I couldn't have without their work. Just know that you're not alone and that this is part of something so much bigger than you, and that's very inspiring.
Bo, I'm going actually in the order of I'm going in the order of the scholarship. So, Bo.
Yes, I think if I could give like advice to the next generation and so I actually knew about this scholarship back when I was in junior college, but I didn't apply because I thought I wasn't good enough. And I think I struggled with a lot of the imposter syndrome, playing myself small. I thought that I didn't really have a space in HIV work, being a trans person, being Asian American. And it took a while for me to apply. I actually applied when I was doing my post-bac after I graduated from undergrad, taking classes to apply to medical school. And if I could tell like the other folks, I think I want to say like, yeah, you deserve to take up space and you are good enough. I think your story matters. And I think just being your authentic self, I think y'all really affirmed me when I got the scholarship. Like I do have a say in this movement, even as a trans Asian guy. Yeah.
Peter.
I mean, my advice, I'll keep it short, like, like those rally chants, make it easier to remember. But, it really never hurts to ask. Never hurts to ask. Because the worst they can do is say no. But the most important thing is to lead with your heart. Show people your heart. And if there's alignment, then it'll work out. And if not, it's their loss. And that brings me to the third bit, which is, I like to say, we're never down. We're either up or we're getting up. So you keep going.
Yeah.
Jesus?
I'll probably say, as of right now, in this day of age, education is super important. They, and you guys probably know who I mean by they, are afraid of having people that are educated and, having people that go against their assumptions of people in different minority groups. So I definitely believe in, education is super important in this time of age as well, having that being maybe a chance of that being lost as well. Just educating yourself, get that master's degree as well, even after your bachelor's as well. I'll totally recommend that.
I think that's a great way to end. And I will share that having known Pedro, I think if Pedro were here, you all are an incredible legacy for what Pedro sought to do, what the scholarship program seeks to do, and what the four of you keep doing. So on behalf of this generation, I just want to say thank you. And thank you, everybody, for being part of this. So thanks a lot.
Thank you.